Hello. Well, let me tell you what dingy thing I did yesterday. I really wanted to read. I really wanted to get on the stick, but I had forgotten about an appointment and it put my window for, I had to be somewhere after that appointment, put my window for reading down to a minuscule amount of time. I got on, the computer was glitchy and I was in a hurry. I wasn't paying attention. I read and I kept thinking, it's odd. This time of day was a different time than I normally read. It's odd that nobody's coming on and chatting. What's going on? Well, I have a personal YouTube account and I have my Best Tutor Friend account. I recorded the whole live read on my personal YouTube account. So I've got to reread chapter 1 and 2 of book 2 so that you guys can have it. There's no way that I figured out that I can download something and re-upload it to my channel. So we are going to reread book 2, chapters 1 and 2. I feel like this is all a redo, but that's what teachers do. They teach the same thing all day. So let's talk about, we are starting a third unit according to this teaching. And this third unit is called the trial. So we're going to jump in book 2, as you can tell by the title of the first chapter, 5 years later. There's going to be a lot of jumping around. I found that in general, jumping the setting and then jumping the time period was very confusing to my students. So I try really hard to be very explicit about where we are. We're in 1780, I believe it is. So if you know your history and your context, 1776 was the American Revolution. And the French also had their French Revolution as well, Bastille Day, which aligns very closely to our 4th of July. So just be aware of where we are in history because we are jumping between France and England. The third unit that we're on starts with, as I said, they call it the rescued, that's not it. The third unit is called the trial, and they call it the book the second. Hey, Haley. I know, it's been a while. Mackenzie, Separate Peace, and Lord of the Flies. Oh, those two go well together. I hope it was helpful. So we're looking at the 5 years past. Well, gosh, yesterday I didn't have any but comments, and now we have so many. 77 and Extra. I'm currently watching your videos on Murder on the Orient Express. And I wanted to say thank you. The teacher reads it for us, but I understand better when you read it. Interesting. I'm wondering why. I don't think I stopped that much on Murder on the Orient Express, but I do try to explain things because I was used to working with kids that reading comprehension was always a challenge. And that's what I'm trying to build up. Hey, Mackenzie. I really am glad you guys are here. So let's go over some of the words for this chapter. We're going to read chapters 1 and 2, and that'll take us about 45 minutes. Eminence is a first word we're going to look at. And remember, we're going to try and pick up context clues and then come back later and see if you know the meaning of the word. So if you want to write it down, eminence, E-M-I-N-E-N-C-E, dismal, D-I-S-M-A-L. The weather is a little dismal today. It's not the bright sunshiny day that we have. It's a little gray and overcast. Animosity, A-N-I-M-O-S-I-T. Demure, D-E-M-U-R. Conspicuous, at C-O-N-S-P-I-C-U-O-U-S. Flinched. When the bug landed on me, I flinched. And immaculate. I-M-M-A-C-U-L-A-T-E. And I think that's as far as we're going to go for that. And in my book, it is page 45, but I doubt many of you have this edition. I will tell you that there is a lot in this that is a little boring, a lot of detail, but remember, some of this detail becomes important later. So I do want to read it all to you. Haley is one of our regulars. She's acting as our host and welcoming our new people. We've got so many great books out there to read, right, Haley? It's just more than we can keep up with. I didn't finish the book that I went to book club last night for. And they talked about it in such an interesting way that I'm trying to finish it. I started listening again today. I just don't get into it. Just sometimes books don't catch me and I just can't get into it. This one does, however. So let's get to it. Let's read. Chapter 1, 5 years later. So we left off having found Monsieur Manette, who is the father of Lucy, the long lost, long thought dead father that's been brought back to life. He's been brought out of prison. He's in a very emotional mental state. And we left it there. And now we jump up 5 years later. Tellson's Bank by Temple Bar was an old-fashioned place, even in the year 1780. So we're 5 years later. It was very small, very dark, very ugly, very incommodious, uncomfortable, incommodious. It was an old-fashioned place, moreover, in the moral attribute that the partners in the house were proud of its smallness, proud of its darkness, proud of its ugliness, proud of its incommodiousness. Notice those of you that are in AP, look at that repetition, that use of repetition. There's a point that he's making. It's very all these things, and they're proud, excessively proud, 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 proud of all these things. It's setting up, remember Dickens was a big social commentary writer, so it's setting up the mood of the old money and the old aristocracy and that sense that flashy, and we call in French, nouveau riche, that show-offy Instagram style wasn't so cool. They wanted to be old and uncomfortable and, not flashy. Thank you, Haley. I like your comments is what I'm thanking. All right. They were even boastful of its eminence, there's one of the words, in those particulars, and were fired by an express conviction that if it were less objectionable, it would be less respectable. This was no passive belief, but an active weapon which they flashed at more convenient places of business. Tellson's, they said, wanted no elbow room. Tellson's wanted no light. Tellson's wanted no embellishment. They want to be, we are old, we are established, we are conservative, and they're very, very proud of that. That's their reputation as a reputable bank. Noakes and Companies might, or Snooks Brothers might, but Tellson's, thank heaven. So those are other competitors. So they're saying, I'm trying to think of things that we do now that are like that, the old way of doing something, it's advertised as being the cool way. We're now, it's always the new, trendy, edgy thing that's cool. But it would be as if, boyfriend jeans are coming back, for example. Things come back around and we say that's better because it has that vintage look. Like I see all this 70s furniture coming back and everybody wants to have the crazy plastic colors and the bright orange, the burnt orange, the avocado green, and that comes out and you're like, I'm very proud of this. This throws me back to mid-century. And they say it in this way that it's so great. Well, I hated it. I lived mid-century and I hated it. But that's against the point that they're making. They're saying because it was the old way, it's the better way. It's the superior way. Thus had it come to pass that Tellson's, I skipped a whole paragraph. Any one of these partners would have disinherited his son on the question of rebuilding Tellson's. In this respect, the house was much on par for the country, which did very often it disinherited sons for suggesting improvements in laws and customs that had been long highly objectionable, but were only the more respectable. So that's again that old aristocracy of England. Thus it had come to pass that Tellson's was the triumphant perfection of inconvenience. After bursting open a door of idiotic obstinacy, I just can't read today. Obstinacy, with a weak rattle in its throat, you fell into Tellson's down 2 steps and came to your senses in a miserable little shop with 2 little counters where the oldest of men made your check shake as if the wind rustled it. Because they're like, they've got your check and, they're old. And so when they hand it to you, it's, I can't hold anything. So they're old too. When you went live, I was just on my channel. I started, oh, for The Alchemist. That's a good one, Haley. Um, so he's shaken and as if the wind rustled it, while they examined the signature by the dingiest of windows, which were always under a shower bath of mud from Fleet Street, which were made the dingier, by their own iron bars proper and the heavy shadow of Temple Bar. If your business necessitated your seeing the house, you were put into a species of condemned hold at the back, where you meditated on a misspent life until the house came with its hands in its pockets, and you could hardly blink at it in the dismal twilight. Your money came out of or went into wormy old wooden drawers, particles of which flew up your nose and down your throat when they were opened and shut. Your banknotes had a musty odor, as if they were fast decomposing into rags again. Your plate was stowed away among the neighboring cesspools, and evil communications corrupted its good polish in a day or two. Your deeds got into extemporized strong rooms made of kitchens and sculleries and fretted all the fat out of their parchments into the banking house air. Your lighter boxes of family papers went upstairs into a Barmecide room that always had a great dining table in it and never had a dinner, and where even in the year 1780, the first letters written to you by your old love or by your little children were but newly released from the horror of being ogled through the windows by the heads exposed on Temple Bar with an insensate brutality and ferocity worthy of Abyssinia and Ashanti. So, one thing I want to mention, Fatima, there you are. One thing I want to mention about banking back then. When you go to a bank now and you put your money into the bank, there's not a box, a lockbox or anything that's holding your money. That money is mingled with the bank itself, and the bank then invests it and makes money off of it. But back in the day, and it's guaranteed, there's an insurance policy to guarantee that if they lose the money, you're guaranteed up to, I think, $10,000 per bank, per account or per bank, I'm not sure. So there's a guarantee on that. But back in the day, when you put your money into the bank, it stayed in your little spot. And when you went to withdraw it, it was there. It was always there for you. And so all this description about Tellson's Bank, one could say is kind of personification because it's really characterizing the bank, which is not as much a part of the story. The credibility of the bank is important. And the fact that Mr. Jarvis Lorry works there is important for credibility. And that's going to matter later in the story. But it's Dickens, again, social commentary. He's really describing the world, much like Pride and Prejudice did, describing the world so that now when we're reading it hundreds of years later, we can really peek into it and have a better understanding of what that world was like and the importance of the life in the banking. And it reminds me of, if you guys watched Mary Poppins when you were kids, the bankers in the father and when he took his kids to the bank. These characters remind me of Tellson's Bank. So I think they really captured that British sense of old banking. But indeed, at that time, putting to death was a recipe much in vogue with all trades and professions, and not least of all with Tellson's. Death is nature's remedy for all things, and why not legislations? Accordingly, the forger was put to death. The utterer of a bad note was put to death. Notice the capital D for death, like it's a personified again, like a proper noun. The utterer of a bad note was put to death. The unlawful opener of a letter was put to death. The purloiner, stealer of 40 shillings and sixpence, the type of money in England, was put to death. The holder of a horse at Tellson's door, who made off with it, was put to death. The coiner of a bad shilling, a counterfeiter, was put to death. The sounders of 3/4 of the notes in the whole gamut of crime were put to death. Not that it did the least good in the way of prevention. It might also have been worth remarking that the fact was exactly the reverse. But it cleared off, as to this world, the trouble of each particular case and left nothing else connected with it to be looked after. Thus, Tellson's, in its day, like greater places of business, its contemporaries, had taken so many lives that, if the heads laid low before it had been ranged on Temple Bar, instead of being privately disposed of, they would probably have excluded what little life the ground floor had in a rather significant manner. So the consequences were very strict for anything. Consequences were very strict for any crimes, especially banking crimes. Pride and Prejudice. I'm going to reread along with your videos on that one because I always fell so. Oh, well, that's just to be expected. Like I put myself to sleep on this channel, and Fatima says it wouldn't let me live chat. But hi, I'm Fatima's sister. Hey, well, that's so nice to have the family here. I love your videos so much, and you have been a great help for me reading Kite Runner. Great. So, are you studying English too with Fatima? I forget. Fatima comes on every day, and I know where she lives, but I've forgotten. So I apologize for that. I'm assuming, do you guys live together? Are you studying? Is this for English class? Or are you studying English secondly? Are you reading Kite Runner for English class? And yeah, Fatima's sister, we don't know your name. So, um, cramped in all kinds of dim cupboards and hutches at Tellson's, the oldest of men carried on the business gravely, seriously. Yes, we live in Arkansas. I knew that. I just had forgotten it. And we live together. And oh, I'm going to mispronounce it. Rukaya? Rukaya? Rukia? I'm sorry. If you put it phonetically for me, I'll try and get it. And remember, I have daughters Shamsi, Saraya, and Shireen, and a son Darab. So it's for they get their names mispronounced. Shamsi in particular. Champsy, everybody calls her. This is for language class. Okay. Haley's always so friendly. I like that about you, Haley. All right. So outside of Tellson's, never by any means in it, unless called in, was an odd job man. Now, this is going to be our messenger from earlier in the beginning of the book. An occasional porter and messenger who served as the live sign of the house. He was never absent during business hours, unless upon an errand, and then he was represented by his son, a grisly urchin of 12, who was his express image. So his son looks exactly like him. People understood that Tellson's, in a stately way, tolerated the odd job man. The house had always tolerated some people in that capacity, and time and tide had drifted this person to his post. His name was Cruncher, and on the youthful occasion of his renouncing by proxy the works of darkness in the easterly parish church of Houndsditch, he had received the added appellation of Jerry. So his name is Jerry Cruncher. And although he just seems like a not important character, he's going to get woven in to this story pretty regularly. So pay attention to him. Thanks, Haley. I like that about you. I think the world needs more people spreading kindness. Speaking of the world at crisis, I hear the ambulance. And already I forgot Rukeya is what I said. Yay, I did it right. Rukeya. I'm so happy that I got it right. And see, Soraya is Soraya, but it's not Soraya, it's Soraya. So that's why I wasn't sure. I was watching a TV show and they had a character Soraya on it, but they pronounced it Soraya. So, but her name is Persian. She was named after a Persian princess, Soraya. Back to the story. So Jerry Cruncher, if you guys are reading along, you're reading this for school, make sure you have him circled as an ongoing minor character. The house had always, the scene was Mr. Cruncher's private lodging at Hanging Sword Alley, Whitefriars. The time, 7:30 of the o'clock on a windy March morning, Anno Domini 1780. Mr. Cruncher himself always spoke of the year of our Lord as Anna Dominos, apparently under so AD, Anno Domini in Latin, apparently under the impression that the Christian era dated from the invention of a popular game, dominoes, by a lady who had bestowed her name upon it. So her name was Anna Dominos. So he never pronounces it right. And we're seeing that class difference that Dickens is putting out, and we're seeing his humor kind of making fun of it. I don't know if I said hi, Fareed, how are you? Mr. Cruncher's apartments were not in a savory neighborhood, not in a good neighborhood, and were but 2 in number. He has 2 rooms in the apartment, even if a closet with a single pane of glass in it might be counted as one. But they were very decently kept. Early as it was on the windy March morning, the room in which he lay abed was already scrubbed throughout, and between the cups and saucers arranged for breakfast and the lumbering deal table, a very clean white cloth was spread. So we are now in the apartment of Jerry Cruncher's home. Mr. Cruncher reposed in her patchwork counterpane like a harlequin at home. At first, he slept heavily, but by degrees began to roll and surge in bed until he rose upon the surface with his spiky hair looking as if it must tear the sheets to ribbons. At which juncture he exclaimed in a voice of dire exasperation, "Burst it if she ain't at it again." A woman of orderly and industrious appearance rose from her knees in a corner with a sufficient haste and trepidation fear to show that she was the person referred to. So this is going to be his wife. "What?" said Mr. Cruncher, looking out of bed for a boot. "You're at it again, are you?" After hailing the morn with his second salutation greeting, he threw a boot at the word as his third, at the woman as a third. So he gets his boot on, throws it at the woman as his greeting for the morning. It was a very muddy boot, and may introduce the odd circumstance connected with Mr. Cruncher's domestic economy that, whereas he often came home after banking hours with clean boots, he often got up next morning to find the same boots covered with clay. This is a perfect example of the complexity of language that makes us get lost in it. Be careful, Fareed. I hope you're doing well. So that very complex sentence gave us a lot of information about Cruncher. He had a muddy shoe boot when he has a clean boot when he comes home from work, but when he wakes up in the morning, his boot is muddy. So then we have to stop and make those inferences. What does that tell us? And it also references his economy. So it is a very complicated literary way of saying he's working at night to earn money, and the work he's doing after he comes home from the bank clean, he goes back out in those same boots and brings them back dirty. So the work he's doing is dirty in some way, connected to mud. And we're going to learn eventually. But these are hints that if you were reading this the first time, you wouldn't know to even pay attention. You would be like, what does that even mean? "What?" said Mr. Cruncher, varying his apostrophe after missing his mark. "What are you up to, aggrawator?" "I was only saying my prayers." "Saying your prayers? You're a nice woman. What do you mean by flopping yourself down and praying again me?" So he immediately assumes that in her praying, she's praying against him. "I was not praying against you. I was praying for you. You weren't. And if you were, I won't be took the liberty with. Here, your mother's a nice woman, young Jerry." So his son's name is Jerry. "Going a praying against your father's prosperity. You've got a dutiful mother, you have, my son. You've got a religious mother, you have, my boy. Going and flopping herself down and praying that the bread and butter may be snatched out of the mouth of her only child." Master Cruncher, who was in his shirt, took this very ill, like he didn't like what his dad said, and turning to his mother, strongly deprecated any praying away of his personal board. So he's believing, Jerry Cruncher, the elder, is believing his wife is praying against his work. So now we know the work is muddy, and we know the work makes him feel guilty. He's doing something to supply for the family, but he believes the wife is praying against him because she's a very godly woman. "And what do you suppose, you conceited female," said Mr. Cruncher with unconscious inconsistency, "that the worth of your prayers may be? Name the price that you put on your prayers at all." "They only come from the heart, Jerry. They are worth no more than that." "Worth no more than that," repeated Mr. Cruncher. "They ain't worth much then. Whether or no, I won't be prayed again. I tell you, I can't afford it. I'm not going to be made unlucky by your sneaking. If you must go flopping yourself down, flop in favor of your husband and child, and not in opposition to him. If I'd had any but an unnatural wife, and this poor boy had had any but an unnatural mother, I might have made some money last week instead of being counterprayed and countermined and religiously circumvented into the worst of luck. Bust me," said Mr. Cruncher, who all this time had been putting on his clothes, "if I ain't, what with piety and one blowed thing and another, been choused this last week into as bad luck as ever a poor devil of an honest tradesman met with. Young Jerry, dress yourself, my boy, and while I clean my boots, keep an eye upon your mother now and then, and if you see any signs of more flopping, like getting on her knees to pray, give me a call, for I tell you," here he addressed his wife once more, "I won't be gone again in this manner. I'm as rickety as a hackney coach. I'm as sleepy as laudanum. Laudanum is a drug. My lines is strained to that degree that I shouldn't know if it wasn't for the pain in them, which was me and which somebody else, yet I'm none the better for it in pocket. and it's my suspicion you've been at it from morning to night. Prevent me from being the better for you in pocket, and I won't put up with it. Aggrawator, and what do you say now? I think her name's Agatha, but it's spelled Aggrawator. So if you guys are British and can help me with what her name is, because he's got some kind of an accent. Aggrawator. And he said his W is like a V, aggravator. Oh, maybe he's calling her an aggravator, not her name. I don't know. Somebody look that up if you're out there to look it up. Growling in addition, such phrases as, yes, you're religious too. You wouldn't put yourself in opposition to the interests of your husband and child, would you? Not you. And throwing off other sarcastic sparks from the whirling grindstone of his indignation, Mr. Cruncher betook himself to his boot cleaning and his general preparation for business. In the meantime, his son, whose head was garnished with tenderer spikes, remember his son Jerry looks just like him, and whose young eyes stood close by one another, as his father's did, kept the required watch upon his mother. He greatly disturbed that poor woman at intervals by darting out of his sleeping closet, where he made his toilet, where he got dressed, with a suppressed cry of, "You going to flop, mother? Hello, father!" And after raising this fictitious alarm, darting in again with an undutiful grin. Mr. Cruncher's temper was not at all improved when he came to his breakfast. He resented Mr. Cruncher saying grace with particular animosity. "Now, aggrawator, what are you up to? At it again?" His wife explained that she merely asked the blessing. "Don't do it," said Mr. Cruncher, looking about as if he rather expected to see the loaf disappear under the efficacy, which means the effectiveness, of his wife's petitions. "I ain't going to be blessed out of house and home. I won't have my victuals." CW is V for him. So aggravator. I think he's calling her aggravator. I think that's the name he's calling for his wife. Adriana, hello. Keep still, exceedingly red-eyed and grim, as if he had been up all night at a party which had taken anything but a convivial turn. Jerry Cruncher worried his breakfast rather than ate it, growling over it like any four-footed inmate of a menagerie. Good imagery. Imagine a lion over his food, protecting it and stalking over it. I mean, that's this animal image we get of Jerry Cruncher. He's crass and he's unkind to his wife and he thinks she's out to hurt him. He's just kind of a grumpy, difficult character. But he'll be throughout the story. He'll be a character throughout the story. Towards 9 o'clock, he smoothed his ruffled aspect and, presenting as respectable and businesslike an exterior as he could overlay his natural self with, issued forth to the occupation of the day. So now he's ready for work. It could scarcely be called a trade, in spite of his favorite description of himself as an honest tradesman. His stock consisted of a wooden stool. So he's a tradesman. His stock would be like his inventory. So his equipment is this wooden stool that young Jerry, walking at his father's side, carried every morning to beneath the banking house window that was nearest Temple Bar. Remember, he's not allowed to go into the bank. He has to sit at the door. Where, with the addition of the first handful of straw that could be gleaned from any passing vehicle to keep the cold and wet from the odd job man's feet, it formed the encampment for the day. On this post of his, Mr. Cruncher was as well known to Fleet Street and the Temple as the bar itself, and was almost as ill-looking. Encampment at 9:15, in good time to touch his three-cornered hat to the oldest of men as they passed into Tellson's. Jerry stood up his station on his windy March morning, with young Jerry standing by him, when not engaged in making forays through the bar to inflict bodily and mental injuries of an acute description on passing boys who were small enough for his amiable purpose. Father and son, extremely like each other, looking silently on at the morning traffic in Fleet Street, with their two heads as near to one another as the two eyes of each were, bore a considerable resemblance to a pair of monkeys. The resemblance was not lessened by the accidental circumstance that the mature Jerry bit and spat out straw, while the twinkling eyes of the youthful Jerry were as restlessly watchful of him as everything else in Fleet Street. The head of one of the regular indoor messengers attached to Tellson's establishment was put through the door, and the word was given, "Porter wanted." So he's calling Jerry in. "Hooray, father! Here's an early job to begin with." Having this given his parent good Godspeed, young Jerry seated himself on the stool, entered on his reversionary interest in the straw his father had been chewing and cogitated. Always rusty. His fingers is always rusty, muttered young Jerry. Where does my father get all that iron rust from? He don't get no iron rust here. Another clue about Jerry's work. So he's got the muddy shoes and he's got rust on his fingers. And the boy knows his dad's up to something. Let's see what's been written. I discovered the Fireside Reading channel and Instagram from your first video from The Alchemist, and we'll definitely start watching Gildart Jackson as well. Yeah, I try to teach him. I fall asleep. I fall asleep with audiobooks. I don't know how you guys stay awake. Adriana, I enjoy your readings. Right now, I'm listening to you read, and then there were none. I love how you stop and explain everything or interrupt with this. Some people get annoyed by that. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Haley, another reading goal. I have to read all of I've not read all of William Shakespeare's plays. I've only read Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth. Hamlet, Midsummer Night's Dream. I really have not read that many. Oh, I love Taming of the Shrew. Reminiscing the time sitting in class, year 2 on the mat, listening to the teacher at the end of the day, just before home time. Bless all my teachers, they were amazing, just like you. Like in year 2, like second grade, then Fatima, those were fun times, being a little kid. I think I knew I wanted to be a teacher back when I was a student because I loved school. I loved workbooks. I loved learning. So thank you. That's very sweet. And blessing to you too. I have to make an assumption, Fatima, that you're observing Ramadan. And I could be wrong, but God bless you if you are. I think we talked about this the last time you were here. All right, guys, that was all of chapter 1. And chapter 2 is not that long. And to keep going with the book, I'm going to go ahead and read it. But those of you that want to stop, you can bookmark it at 31, like say 32. And then when you come back, you can join chapter 2 if you need to go. So, chapter 2. You know the Old Bailey well, no doubt, said one of the oldest of clerks to Jerry the messenger. So from London, you know the Old Bailey. But if you haven't studied much about London, the Old Bailey is a very famous, it's the combination courthouse and then prison. So if you were in trouble, you would go to court there, the prison would be held there, and it was called the Old Bailey. Yes, sir, returned Jerry in something of a dogged manner. I do know the Bailey. Just so. And you know Mr. Lorry. I know Mr. Lorry, sir, much better than I know the Bailey. Much better, said Jerry. Much better, said Jerry. So I know the place, I know the Old Bailey, and I would recognize Mr. Jarvis Lorry. Not unlike a reluctant witness at the establishment in question, then I, as an honest tradesman, wish to know the Bailey. Like I know Mr. Jarvis Lorry better than the Bailey. I don't want to know the Bailey because I'm an honest guy. Notice that he says he's honest so often. What does that begin to make you doubt? His honesty, right? Thank you. And all our lovely listeners. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful Friday afternoon. No, I understood you, Haley. I want to too, but wanting to and actually doing it in my world are not always the same thing. So at this age, I've still not read them all. I haven't read any of the histories. So maybe Richard. I might have read. And now I'm thinking about Shakespeare. You've got me sidetracked. Antony and Cleopatra. Yeah. All right, back to chapter 2. Book 2, chapter 2. Very well. Find the door where the witnesses go in and show the doorkeeper this note for Mr. Lorry. He will then let you in. Into the court, sir? Into the court. Mr. Cruncher's eyes seemed to get a little closer to one another and to interchange the inquiry. What do you think of this? Am I to wait in the court, sir? He asked as the result of that conference. I'm going to tell you. The doorkeeper will pass the note to Mr. Lorry, and do you make any gesture that will attract Mr. Lorry's attention and show him where you stand. So when you get there, kind of try and catch his attention. Then what you have to do is to remain there until he, Mr. Lorry, wants you. Is that all, sir? That's all. He wishes to have a messenger at hand. This is to tell him you are there. This note is to tell him that you are there. As the ancient clerk deliberately folded and superscribed the note, Mr. Cruncher, after surveying him in silence until he came to the blotting paper stage, remarked, I suppose they'll be trying forgeries this morning. Treason. He wants to know what is on the court docket there. That's quartering. So the what do you call it? The judgment. No, sometimes I just go blank. The penalty of this particular crime, treason, is something called quartering. It was an old way of really torturing people to death. They'll get into a very gruesome description of it, so I won't, but think in 4 parts. Quartering. It is the law, remarked the ancient clerk, turning his surprised spectacles upon him. It is the law. It's hard in the law to spile a man, I think. It's hard enough to kill him, but it's very hard to spile him, sir. Not at all, returned the ancient clerk. Speak well of the law. Take care of your chest and voice, my good friend, and leave the law to take care of itself. I give you that advice. It's the damp, sir, what settles on my chest and voice, said Jerry. I leave you to judge what a damp way of earning a living mine is. Well, well, said the old clerk. We all have our various ways of gaining a livelihood. Some of us have damp ways, and some of us have dry ways. Here's the letter. Go along. Jerry took the letter, and remarking to himself with less internal deference that he made an outward show of, you are a lean one, too, made his bow, informed his son in passing of his destination, and went his way. They hanged at Tyburn in those days, so the street outside Newgate had not obtained one infamous notoriety that has since attached to it, but the jail was a vile place in which most kinds of debauchery and villainy were practiced, and where dire diseases were bred, that came into court with the prisoners and sometimes rushed straight from the dock at the Lord Chief Justice himself and pulled him off the bench. It's a dangerous, dirty, germ-infested place, the court. It had more than once happened that the judge in the black cap pronounced his own doom as certainly as the prisoner's, and even died before him because of the diseases that are there. The judges oftentimes died before they could execute their prisoners. For the rest, the Old Bailey was famous as a kind of deadly inn-yard from which pale travelers set out continually in carts and coaches on a violent passage into the other world, traversing some 2.5 miles of public street and road, and shaming few good citizens, if any. So powerful is use, and so desirable to be good use in the beginning. It was famous, too, for the pillory. Remember in Scarlet Letter, she was in a pillory. It's where your hands are through those 2 little holes in your head. You have to stand like this, and they throw things at you, things like that. Fatima, you're so kind. Like always, I wish I had the link to our Discord to share with the new subscribers. Camille, no problem. Better late than never, my grandmother used to say. Let's see if I can drop it in for us, the link. Number list. I'm not good at this. Let's see if I can get there. How do we know that's update ready? Inbox, pin messages. No. I'm trying to invite people. Here we go. Copy. And let's put it in. Where is the live stream? Is here. You see, I have to talk to myself to do this. Okay, and there is so much to read. That's always the case with you, Haley. You're always busy, but you do watch a lot of things, and you do go to school, so you get a lot done. Fatima, that is the Discord link that Haley was asking about. We chat there. I usually try and let y'all know, like yesterday, I said, oh my goodness, I recorded this on the wrong, because I told everybody I was coming on to read, and then I recorded it on the wrong channel. So I let everybody know what happened. I'll post things. Oh, which by the way, Dinah, when you come on later, and I put it in Discord too, I'm at my Discord limit of what I can upload. So I can't upload the documents from this book to give you the questions that are in the back. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way I could scan that or make it available to you guys. I don't know how to do it in that way. All right, back to the story. The pillory is where they're hanging their heads through and they get things thrown at them. A wise old institution that inflicted a punishment of which no one could foresee the extent. Also, for the whipping post, another dear old institution, very humanizing sarcasm on Dickens' part, and softening to behold in action. Also, for extensive transactions and blood money, another fragment of ancestral wisdom, systematically leading to the most frightful mercenary crimes that could be committed under heaven. Altogether, the Old Bailey at that date was a choice illustration of the precept that whatever it is right. In other words, this is the way we do things. So our society says it's the right thing. And, that's still true now. That's an argument. Well, if the police shot him, they did the right thing because they're the police. That's what is. So it's right. And Dickens' time period had a lot of injustices and inequities in it. And that's what his commentary is about. So there is a way to tie his thoughts and his commentary into today's modern society. I'm glad. Yeah, Camille, I'm doing well too. My son is coming from Brazil even as we speak. When I started recording, he told me he was headed to the airport. So I get to pick him up tomorrow and have, I think, 2 months with him. He's going to visit. I'm super, super excited about that. So thank you for asking. Whatever is right. An aphorism that would be as final as it is lazy. Did it not include the troublesome consequence that nothing that ever was wrong? Interesting comments. Making his way through the tainted crowd, dispersed up and down this hideous scene of action, with the skill of a man accustomed to make his way quietly, the messenger found out the door he sought and handed in his letter through a trap in it. For people then paid to see the play at the Old Bailey, just as they paid to see the play in Bedlam. Only the former entertainment, that's people coming into Discord, so let me mute it. So they have a little trapdoor window, knock, 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 you open it and they pass the note through. For people then paid to see the play at the Old Bailey, people paid to go to court and watch what was happening at court, just like they would to go to theater. Only the former entertainment was much dearer, means more expensive. Therefore, all the Old Bailey doors were well guarded, except indeed the social doors by which the criminals got there, and those were always left wide open. After some delay and demur, the door grudgingly turned on its hinges a very little way and allowed Mr. Jerry Cruncher to squeeze himself into court. "What's on?" he asked in a whisper of the man he found himself next to. "Nothing yet. What's coming on?" "The treason case." "The quartering one, eh?" "Ah," returned the man with a relish. "He'll be drawn on a hurdle to be half hanged, and then he'll be taken down and sliced before his own face, like in the body. And then his inside will be taken out and burnt while he looks on. Then his head will be chopped off and he'll be cut into quarters." That's the sentence. How gruesome and inhumane is that? Oh my gosh. I hope the new joiners are Fatima and her sister. They'll find, if he's found guilty, you mean to say, Jerry added by way of proviso, like explanation. "Oh, they'll find him guilty," said the other. "Don't you be afraid of that." Mr. Cruncher's attention was here diverted to the doorkeeper, whom he saw making his way to Mr. Lorry with a note in his hand. Mr. Lorry sat at a table among the gentlemen in wigs, not far from a wigged gentleman. The prisoner's counsel, who had a great bundle of papers before him, and nearly opposite another wigged gentleman. Remember in court, they wore those white wigs. With his hands in his pockets, whose whole attention, when Mr. Cruncher looked at him then or afterwards, seemed to be concentrated on the ceiling of the court. After gruff coughing and he's trying to get Mr. Lorry's attention, rubbing his chin and signing with his hand, Jerry attracted the notice of Mr. Lorry, who had stood up to look at him and who quietly nodded and sat down again. "What's he got to do with the case?" asked the man he had spoken with. "Blessed if I know," said Jerry. "What have you got to do with it then, if a person may inquire?" "Blessed if I know that either," said Jerry. "I don't know why I'm here." The entrance of the judge and a consequent great stir and settling down in the court stopped the dialogue. Presently, the dock became the central point of interest. Two jailers who had been standing there went out, and the prisoner was brought in and put to the bar. He was brought in, and the defendant, the prisoner, is made to stand to hear the whole court case. Victoria, hi. Oh, 3 years ago. Yeah, that's probably been how long it's been since I've read it. And this is probably my third time to read it. I really like it too. Sometimes it's too wordy, there's too much stuff, but in general, I like it. The object of all this staring and blaring was a young man of about 5 and 20, well grown and well looking, with a sunburned cheek and a dark eye. This is going to be characterization of a main character, so be paying attention. His condition was that of a young gentleman. He was plainly dressed in black or very dark gray, and his hair, which was long and dark, was gathered in a ribbon at the back of his neck, more to be out of his way than for ornament, as an emotion of the mind will express itself through any covering of the body. So the paleness which his situation engendered came through the brown upon his cheek, showing the soul to be stronger than the sun. He was otherwise quite self possessed, bowed to the judge, and stood quiet. So we get an idea of this strong character, good looking character. Um, his soul shines through, is what the indication is, better than the suntan that he has. The sort of interest with which this man was stared and breathed at was not a sort that elevated humanity. The fact that they're staring at him doesn't make us humans look good because they're eager to see, oh, this is the guy that's going to get horrifically quartered in this horrible, gruesome thing. Oh, I can't help but look. What's he look like? What's he going to look like after? He's saying that's the bad, dark side of humans. Had he stood in peril of a less horrible sentence, had there been a chance at any one of its savage details being spared, by just so much would he have lost in his fascination. The form that was to be doomed to be so shamefully mangled was the sight. The immortal creature that was to be so butchered and torn asunder yielded the sensation. Whatever gloss the various spectators put upon the interest, according to their several arts and powers of self deceit, the interest was, at the root of it, ogreish. We've just got this dark side to us as humans that we just want to watch these gruesome things. We want to watch um, scary movies. That's why we go to them. We want to see the gore and the awful stuff. And that's human nature, Dickens is saying. Silence in the court. Charles Darnay had yesterday pleaded not guilty to an indictment denouncing him with infinite jingle and jangle for that he was a false traitor to our serene, illustrious, excellent, and so forth prince, our lord the king, by reason of his having on diverse occasions and by diverse means, like many, and ways, assisted Louis the French king in his wars against our said serene, illustrious. So this is the reading of the case against Charles Darnay. Charles Darnay is a main character. You want to circle that name. He's the good looking guy with the hair pulled back. He's the one on charge for being a traitor against the King of England and helping to be a spy for the King of France. So it goes on, blah, 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 blah. This much, Jerry, with his head becoming more and more spiky as the law terms bristled it, made out with huge satisfaction, and so arrived circuitously at the understanding that the aforesaid, and over again aforesaid, Charles Darnay stood there before him upon his trial, that the jury was swearing in, and that Mr. Attorney General was making ready to speak. The accused, who was, and who knew he was, being mentally hanged, beheaded, and quartered by everybody there, neither flinched from the situation nor assumed any theatrical air in it. I'm going to tell you, I like Charles Darnay, but he's a very complex character. So he's going to stand there proudly and take in what he's getting. Christine, yes, I do too. One of my favorite horror books is Christine. I don't like the horror genre. It should come as no surprise to any of you that have read with me very long. Stephen King, my son loves Stephen King. The accused, and we already read that, the court was all bestrewn with herbs and sprinkled with vinegar as a precaution against jail air and jail fever. So it's got this smell to it where they put things out to try and get rid of the stink. Over the prisoner's head there was a mirror to throw the light down upon him. Crowds of the wicked and the wretched had been reflected in it. So it just connects him to all the evil, like the terrible, drastic things that had happened in that court, and had passed from its surface and this earth together, haunted in a most ghastly manner that abominable place would have been if the glass could ever have rendered back its reflections, as the ocean is one day to give up its dead. Some passing thought of the infamy and disgrace. Infamy is to be famous for evil deeds or bad deeds, and disgrace for which it had been reserved may have struck the prisoner's mind. Be that as it may, a change in his position making him conscious of a bar of light across his face, he looked up, and when he saw the glass, his face flushed, and his right hand pushed the herbs away. He realized this was hanging over him. Um, it had happened that the action turned his face to that side of the court, which was on his left. About on a level with his eyes, there sat, in that corner of the judge's bench, two persons upon whom his look immediately rested, so immediately, and so much to the changing of his aspect, that all the eyes that were turned upon him turned to them. So this two people caught his eye over in the corner. He turns and is looking at them. So now all the court is looking at them. That's true, Haley. It's not for everybody. It doesn't mean I don't think you should enjoy it. I know my kids loved horror. I just don't enjoy it. I didn't like that passage we just read about the gruesomeness of quartering. I have this visual imagery and I just see it in my mind so much and it just stays with me and it really horrifies me and I don't like that feeling. The spectators saw in the two figures a young lady of a little more than 20. Now, what other young lady have we met a little more than 20? And a gentleman, remember it's 5 years later, so she's a young 20-something. And a gentleman who is evidently her father. What daughter and father couple have we seen? Her father, a man of very remarkable appearance in respect of the absolute whiteness of his hair and a certain indescribable intensity of face, not of an active kind, but pondering and self-communing. When this expression was upon him, he looked as if he were old, but when it was stirred and broken up, as it was now in a moment, on his speaking to his daughter, he became a handsome man, not past the prime of life. So who is this couple? Lucy and her father. Exactly. It's Monsieur Manette and Lucy. Good job, Haley. His daughter had one of her hands drawn through his arms as she sat by him, and the other pressed upon it. She had drawn close to him in her dread of the scene and in her pity for the prisoner. Her forehead had been strikingly expressive of an engrossing terror and compassion that saw nothing but the peril of the accused. This had been so very noticeable, so very powerfully and naturally shown, that starters who had no pity for him were touched by her, and the whisper went about, "Who are they?" Jerry the messenger, who had made his observations in his own manner, and who had been sucking the rust off his fingers in his absorption, stretched his neck to hear who they were. The crowd about him had pressed and passed the inquiry on to the nearest attendant, and from him it had been more slowly pressed, my neighbor's dog, and passed back. At last, it got to Jerry. Witnesses. For which side? Against. Against which side? Against the prisoner. The judge, whose eyes had gone, and I don't think that's right. The judge, whose eyes had gone in the general direction, recalled them, leaned back in his seat, and looked steadily at the man whose life was in his hand, as Mr. Attorney General rose to spin the rope, grind the axe, and hammer the nails into the scaffold. That means the prosecuting attorney is standing up to bring the case against Charles Darnay. It's going to get really good. I like the court scene. Now I was about to close up, but no, I want to go back to our definitions. Those of you that are done with reading, you're dismissed from class. But if you want to work on your vocabulary, I'm going to go over those words. And eminence. Eminence was the first word. So in context of the story, it says they were even boastful of its eminence in those particulars and were fired by an express conviction that if it were not less objectionable, it would be less respectable. And then a context clue is, remember, eminence, we're working on Eminence. Mickey Mantle, a baseball player, owes his eminence, a baseball player who's very well known, owes his eminence among baseball heroes to his home run record. So A, eminence means adaptability. B means place of honor. C means award. D means quiet reputation. I will also say that eminence, oftentimes when they see a king come in, he's referred to as your eminence. So again, of those four, adaptability, place of honor, award, quiet reputation. And the sentence from the story, they were even boastful of its eminence in those particulars. So if you want to write it down, and then when I'm done, I'll come back and tell you the answer. Dismal. So in the book, it comes out of a part, you could hardly blink at it in the dismal twilight. We're kind of sitting in dismal twilight. I can't see. Haley, I'm not going to give you the answer until I come back, but I'm glad you're playing. Thank you. And then the context clue, it was a dismal day of gray skies and a chill rain. That's the kind of day we're having here. So A, cheerful. Now that would be the opposite if it's not a cheerful day on a gray day. B, irritating. Gloomy, C. D, fading, dismal. Is it cheerful, irritating, gloomy, or fading? Dismal, D-I-S-M-A-L. Animosity. In the story, it said he resented Mrs. Cruncher's saying grace with particular animosity. And the context clue, the audience showed animosity toward the speaker because of his backward, dangerous ideas. So is it A, liveliness, B, appreciation, C, neutral feeling, or D, hatred? So let's remember how, in general, how did Mr. Cruncher describe his wife? With particular animosity, it says. I love that you guys are playing along. Thanks so much. So again, liveliness, appreciation, neutral feelings, hatred, animosity. And the next one, demure. After some delay and demur, the door grudgingly turned on its hinges a very little way and allowed Mr. Jerry Cruncher to squeeze himself into court. And then the context clue, since there was no demur, the chairman went ahead to the next item on the agenda. So to be demure is to, in this case, delay and demur. So A, objection, B, noise, C, cry of approval, D, vigorous action. That is number 4, demure. And it is got meanings in different ones. You might think it is a characteristic, an adjective of someone being demure. So she is a demure lady. So you can think about passivity, and it's used to be a very traditionally feminine characteristic. You guys are on the ball here, no hints, but you're doing really good. Number 5, conspicuous, C-O-N-S-P-I-C-U-O-U-S, conspicuous among these latter, like an animated bit of the spiked wall of Newgate, Jerry stood. An animated bit of the spiked wall of Newgate, Jerry stood. So here's our context clue. At the Woodstock Festival, see, this is written in the 70s. Do you guys even know the Woodstock Festival? There was a conspicuous emphasis on youth. The Woodstock Festival was one of the first music festivals, and it was blasted full, tons of 70s potheads and partiers, and nobody my age would have been there. So it was conspicuous for number of youth there. So is it clearly visible, somewhat concealed, like hidden, long-standing, or optimistic? I know demure is a tough one. This one isn't the way I normally think demure. So it was you really have to look at the context clues for that one. And Sweet Jean, hey, I've been reading 1,000 Splendid Suns. I love that book. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. So let's look at demure again. Let me give you another hint. If I'm passive, if as a woman I'm demure and I'm quiet, I sit demurely in the corner while everyone is having a heated debate, right? I'm not causing any interruption or anything. So look at the choices: objection, noise, cry of approval, vigorous action. So we'll come back to it, but see if you can figure it out. And I think our last one is flinched. The accused neither flinched from the situation nor assumed any theatrical air in it. Ed flinched involuntarily as he saw the car come to a screeching halt within inches of a stalled truck. So stood still, relaxed, shrank back, moved about. Oh, that could be several. I want to see what they're calling that one because I could make the argument for two of those. But if you flinch, think about the action. Victoria, thank you for trying. It's not private approval, Haley. It's cry of approval. I just want to make sure you have the right words. Because private approval, I could see you being the answer. So I've just told you it's not C, because it's cry of approval. Like, hey, yay, I cheer for you, right? And did we have immaculate? The lofty example of his immaculate and unimpeachable witness for the crown had community. Nope, that's not one of ours. So let's go back and answer. Number one, eminence is B, place of honor. You guys got that one right. Dismal is C, gloomy. You guys got that one right. Animosity is D, hatred. Ding, 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 ding. You guys are doing great. Demure, which was difficult. 4 is A, objection. So after some delay and demure, so to push back against or to be objection, cry of approval. I must have misheard. Yeah, that's okay, Haley. Sometimes my speech is not so clear. Conspicuous is clearly visible. I don't know if you guys answered that one, but it's clearly visible. And 6, flinched. They had shrank back and moved about, but I could make the case for both of those because if you flinch from something, you're moving about, but they're saying pull back. So it's the idea of you flinch, you pull into yourself. So, and that's something to think about on test. If you come down to 2 like that, don't spend a lot of time pondering over it. Just go with your gut and see what you think is right, because you have these kind of questions on ACTs and SATs, things like that. So that is our lesson for today. I hope you guys are liking the book. We have a long way to go, but we're making some headway. If you haven't subscribed or you have friends that you think would benefit, let them know. Family members you think would benefit, let them know. And we'll keep reading and growing together. I've got to go run the vacuum because my son is coming home and I want him to come home to a nice, clean, lovely place because I've been missing him. It's been 2 years since I've seen him face to face. So I'm super, super excited. I think this is one of my longest reads in a long time. But remember, I'm teaching as well. And some of you smart helpers can come in and put the timestamps on it for me where it says chapter 2, chapter 3, and then the vocabulary. I'm not so good at that, but I know some of y'all are great at that. All right. I need to go vacuum. Don't want to, but I'm going to go do it. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Be productive. Probably those of you on Discord, I will keep you posted when I get to read. But with David coming, I doubt tomorrow I'm going to get online unless he just needs to crash and sleep because it's a time difference and it's a long journey. He's leaving today and he doesn't get here until tomorrow around 11. So he may be really beat and I may sneak on and read while he's sleeping. Thank you, Haley. I appreciate that. And we'll chat on Discord too. Those of you that joined us on Discord, thank you. And let's keep reading. And I will read to you next time. See ya.